It was an ordinary night when Sarah set out for the drive. The kind of night where the moon hung low in the sky, casting a soft glow over the empty road ahead. The soft hum of her car's engine and the occasional rustling of leaves along the roadside were the only sounds in the quiet, rural countryside. She had been at a friend's house for dinner and was now headed home, a smooth, solitary ride across the familiar stretch of highway that led from the hills back into town. The clock on her dashboard blinked 12:37 a.m. She would be home in less than an hour. There was no one else on the road. The headlights pierced through the darkness, illuminating the pavement ahead, but the night was otherwise still, as if the world itself had paused. As she drove, Sarah felt a sense of peace. The quiet roads, the calm air, it was the perfect kind of driving, without interruptions. But after a few miles, she noticed something strange in her rearview mirror. A set of headlights. At first, she thought it was just another car catching up, but when she looked again, the lights seemed to stay exactly where they were, directly behind her, not gaining any ground. Sarah frowned. Her speed was steady, and she was well below the limit. She didn't think she was holding anyone up. A few more minutes passed, and the headlights were still there, unwavering. She glanced over her shoulder through the rearview mirror again, but there was nothing. The headlights hadn't moved an inch. Her stomach tightened. She considered pulling over, but for some reason, she couldn't bring herself to. The road was too lonely, and the thought of stopping in the dark was unsettling. She shook her head, telling herself it was nothing, just another car, a shadow of her own mind making it feel stranger than it was. But the sensation lingered. A few more miles passed, and Sarah's eyes kept flicking back to the mirror. The headlights were still behind her? Too close for comfort now. She decided to pull over. It wasn't an easy decision, but the unease she felt was growing slowly. She steered her car to the side of the road, parking beneath the swaying trees. Her headlights illuminated the darkened shoulder, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. There was no other car in sight. She sat there for a moment, her fingers gripping the wheel tightly. Then, in the silence of the night, she heard it. A soft thump, thump, right against her back window. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat. With shaky hands, Sarah reached for the rearview mirror and looked again. But this time, the mirror was different. Instead of seeing the headlights that had been trailing her, she saw something worse. Two eyes, dark, hollow, and wide. Eyes staring back at her from the shadows just beyond the glass. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she turned her head to the back window, expecting to see something, or someone, standing there. But it was empty. She quickly shifted the car into drive and pulled back onto the road, the sensation of those eyes still burning into her mind. The road was empty again, the headlights behind her gone. The rest of the drive home felt endless, even though it was just a short distance. Her hands gripped the wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. The headlights didn't appear again, but the uneasy feeling never fully left her. When she finally pulled into her driveway and turned off the engine, she sat there for a moment, collecting her thoughts. Her front porch light flickered in the distance. She looked up at the rearview mirror one last time. It was empty, but as she stepped out of the car, the strangest thing happened. From the corner of her eye, she saw something move in the reflection, the outline of a figure, barely visible, standing by the rear of her car. The figure was watching her. With a gasp, Sarah turned and whipped around, but again, there was nothing. Just the dark, empty street behind her. With trembling hands, she closed the door, locked it, and rushed inside. She didn't sleep that night. Not a wink. The next day, she told her friend about the experience, and they both laughed it off, chalking it up to exhaustion. But months later, as Sarah drove along that same road at night, she couldn't shake the feeling. The headlights. The eyes. She had learned to expect it, the strange sensation of being watched, and as the years went by, she wondered, was it something supernatural? A trick of her mind? Or was someone really following her in the dark? She still drove those roads. But now, whenever the headlights appeared in her rearview mirror, she'd glance quickly and keep her foot pressed firmly on the gas. Just in case. Months passed, and Sarah's once peaceful drives home became a ritual of unease. Each time she ventured down that desolate road, the feeling of being watched grew stronger, like an invisible presence lurking just beyond the reach of her headlights. But as time went on, she learned to manage the creeping dread, telling herself it was just her overactive imagination or the remnants of a fleeting, bizarre experience. But one evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the first hint of twilight settled over the road, Sarah's nerves returned. She had finished work late again, and as she drove through the winding, darkened highway, the unsettling quiet of the night began to press in on her. The headlights appeared again. At first, she convinced herself it was a passing vehicle, but when she glanced in the rearview mirror, the lights were still there, too close. Too unmoving. Her grip on the steering wheel tightened. This was exactly how it had been that night, the eerie, unblinking headlights that followed her without gaining ground. Her breath quickened, her pulse pounding in her ears. As she glanced from the mirror to the empty road ahead, she decided to pull over again. The car slowed and moved to the shoulder, her heart thudding loudly in her chest. Her fingers shook as she gripped the wheel. The headlights in the mirror hadn't wavered. She hadn't seen any movement in the distance, no sign of another vehicle. The air outside the car felt thick and oppressive. In a heartbeat, she had convinced herself to look again. Slowly, she turned her head to face the rearview mirror once more. There were no headlights. No car. Her breath caught in her throat, and her pulse stilled for a moment. Nothing but darkness behind her. Confused and shaken, Sarah turned her head back toward the road. The unsettling quiet stretched around her. Her hands felt clammy on the wheel as she considered pulling back onto the road and continuing home, but something told her to look once more. This time, her gaze didn't fall on the road behind her. Instead, it fell on the passenger seat. In the soft glow of her car's interior light, she saw it. A shadow. It was faint, but unmistakable. A silhouette, as if someone was sitting beside her. The shape was shifting, as if moving closer, slowly, impossibly close. Her heart nearly stopped, panic surged through her veins, and she whipped her head to the side, expecting to see someone there, someone real. But the seat was empty. The car was still, eerily still. The shadow was gone. Trembling, Sarah's eyes darted back to the rearview mirror, but now it was empty. No headlights, no car. She slammed her foot on the gas pedal, speeding away from the shoulder, her heart racing in her chest. She didn't dare look again. Her grip on the wheel was like a vice, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. Every corner, every bend in the road made her feel as though something was lurking just out of sight. When she reached home, she parked the car quickly, practically running to her front door. She locked it behind her, breathing heavily as she leaned against the door. Her heart was still pounding. She stood there for a long time, waiting for the adrenaline to fade, but it never did. That night, Sarah stayed awake, staring out of her bedroom window at the empty street. In the weeks that followed, she couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was still following her. Every night as she drove home, she'd catch a glimpse of headlights in her rearview mirror. At times, the lights would vanish, and at others, they'd stay far too close for comfort. Eventually, the fear took hold. Sarah stopped driving at night altogether. She made arrangements to leave work earlier, taking care to avoid the dark roads at all costs. But the presence, the feeling of being watched, never quite left her, and every now and then, when she had to drive past that stretch of highway, she'd glance nervously at the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the headlights once more. Somewhere, deep inside, she knew she'd never truly escape it.